Oh, me, mama. Let's do this, me, mama. Hi, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back if you're a return visitor. Today, I want to represent a view of reality in a mathematical equation. I think this might give certain people some clarity as to what they believe or have been taught the universe is, as to what the conclusion of that view is. Now, I've put together this equation and it is not perfect. I'm not a physicist, I'm not a mathematician. The point of it is not to display an error-free or perfect mathematical equation. And it does also combine logical elements as well, which, as far as I understand, you can't just mash into a mathematical equation. But the point is to use intellect, wisdom, and as much common sense as possible to see that the equation itself does a good enough job, in my opinion, to display very commonly held views of reality. So let's jump into it. So the very first element of the equation is picking a theory of how the universe started, began, or how it was before everything started. So I've just chosen two examples here because there are many examples, and the problem is they are all theories, so we have to choose one. So we can choose something as simple as there was nothing at the beginning of the universe, which is a very simple and older interpretation of it. Or you could choose something like all energy was there. So energy was equal to or greater than 10 to the power of 69 joules, but there was no space and time yet. It was an infinitely small point. So you have to minus your volume and time there. But realistically, you could just add anything in here, anything to reason. But once you've chosen your theory, the next thing you need to add is a contradiction, because every theory has a contradiction, because each one of those theories violates another understanding of the universe. So they're all contradictions in one way or another. So you need to add a contradiction. An example for one, a simple contradiction for the first theory of nothingness at the beginning of the universe is where the proposition that nothing can produce everything, which is the universe that we see and beyond, and the negation to that proposition is that nothing cannot produce anything by its own definition. Simple. So the contradiction for the second example is that you already had all of the energy in the universe, but you just didn't have space and time yet. So that simple contradiction would be that where the proposition is that energy can create space and time, where the negation is that space and time should have already existed if energy also already existed. Anyway, you just keep doing this. This is essential to any theory of how the universe began or formed. So you just need to insert your contradiction here. So you have your theory, you have your contradiction, which is necessary. From there, it's a bit more simple. You add equal to or greater than 10 to the 69th power joules, plus time, plus volume, plus one of Friedman's equations for the expansion of space-time in the universe. There's a few of these, or at least two, so I just put one of them in here. Then you need to add the physical constants, and they all need to be equal to all of this, which you can see over to the right here. You have your relative standard uncertainty factor, which for some of them is exact, and for others it gives the uncertainty value there. But I'll slowly scroll through these, because these are all necessary for the universe that we live in, for reality. Just speed it up a bit. And again, this is just to paint the picture of reality, because these are necessary for reality to be as it is, all of them to a very fine degree, or exact. The next thing we need to add is a simple contradiction where the proposition is that the universe should be the number of baryons is equal to the number of antibaryons. And the negation is that the universe actually has the number of baryons being greater than the number of antibaryons. You then need to add in the baryon to photon ratio, which is approximately equal to 6 plus or minus 0.25 times 10 to the negative power of 10. You then need to add another simple contradiction where the proposition is that life began, and the negation is that all life comes from pre-existing life. Then need to add an arbitrary definition of what you believe life is, because there's still not a consensus to what life is. You then need to add in that RNA is formed, plus RNA is formed with the ability of majority error-free self-replication, plus RNA isn't destroyed before the following prerequisites occur, plus RNA has all of the external components necessary for it to be able to self-replicate, plus mutations in RNA equal new, plus more, plus beneficial genetic information, whilst not losing or corrupting the genetic information required for self-replication, plus RNA becomes DNA whilst maintaining its self-replicating properties, plus DNA is formed with the ability of majority error-free self-replication, plus DNA isn't destroyed before the following prerequisites occur, plus DNA has all the external components necessary for it to be able to self-replicate, plus mutations in DNA replications equals more, or new, plus more plus beneficial genetic information whilst not losing or corrupting the genetic information required for self-replication, plus DNA becomes a cell whilst maintaining all of its self-replicating properties, plus the cell is formed with the ability of majority error-free replication ad nauseum, plus the Fermi paradox plus consciousness minus life minus consciousness equals maximum entropy. Now, for anyone who has a decent understanding of mathematics, that should make sense. This is not a new idea. You can add generally your own view of what happens up in here to some degree within reason, and you will still end up down here at maximum entropy. Unless you want to believe something else that's a fringe theory, that you don't end up at maximum entropy. But almost all consensus is this is where the universe ends and heads towards. But to clean up the above long-winded equation, I've just made it simple here, where you have a contradiction plus the energy of the universe plus time plus space plus the expansion of space and time plus a physical constant plus another contradiction plus baryon asymmetry being the value that it is plus a third contradiction plus life plus evolution plus the Fermi paradox plus consciousness minus life minus consciousness equals maximum entropy. And for anyone who's confused about why the Fermi paradox is added and essential to this equation, because it is how our universe is, it is how reality is, and it is what we observe. Therefore, it's necessary to add into how the universe and reality is, so it's a part of the equation. The nice thing about this equation, either of them, long-winded as they are, and you can make them even longer than they are now, is that you can simplify it to x equals maximum entropy, where x equals everything. That is how a universe works if these equations are the way that they are. And again, the equation doesn't need to be perfect. I don't need to add everything into the equation that is perceivable. That is where we end up. This. Now, I know I've been explaining some of the symbols and equations that are in here, but to put it into words that most people should understand is that the equation says that whatever theory you believe to have about how the universe began, plus a contradiction of said theory, plus all the energy in the universe, which is equal to mass, which is equal to the matter and antimatter of the universe, plus time, plus volume, which is the V, volume is space, three-dimensional space, plus the expansion and constant addition of space, plus all the physical constants being exactly or near exactly what they are, plus the contradiction of baryon asymmetry, which is that there should be an equal amount of baryons, which is matter, the things that we can see and touch, the stuff, and antibaryons, which is antimatter, the opposite of that. But there isn't, hence it's a contradiction. Plus the contradiction of how life began, plus life, whatever you define that to be, plus evolution occurring as it does, plus the Fermi paradox, which is equal to if life can create itself, where is all the life in the universe? Minus all life, minus all consciousness equals maximum entropy. And if you're wondering why minus all life and minus all consciousness is a part of the equation, it is a necessary part of the equation. because as you head towards maximum entropy, the universe cannot create or sustain those things anymore. So to simplify it one more time, everything in the universe will continue to spread out until it becomes a cold, dark, lifeless void. Basically, everything is equal to nothing. Now, a part of me thinks and believes I shouldn't have to explain any further than that, because it should be very simple and clear at this point. That if this view of reality, even though it's caked in hypotheses, theories, and contradictions, is true, everything is worthless. It has no value, it dies and becomes essentially nothing at the end of time and the universe. And it does not matter if you're here now and that'll happen a billion trillion years away, or if you're there during the last billionth trillionth year of the universe. All of it will matter to nothing. Therefore, I wrote this little blurb here that hopefully should make it clear again. This is not an exercise in philosophy. We're not doing philosophy here. This is mathematics. At least a good attempt at it. So zero, the number zero has value. It's good. It stands for something. It explains something. However, the permanent loss of all life, all consciousness, does not have any value. If that doesn't make sense to you, you need to wake up. You need to learn, educate, and grow some wisdom. I'm not trying to be offensive or rude. It is just the fact. Sure, it might be a little bit boggling, but it's a simple concept once you get your head around it. So therefore, every form of attempt, mathematical or otherwise, to understand and render a true representation of reality, where, at its conclusion, the value or presence of consciousness is permanently zero, also has no value once it is realized. Because if this happens, the point of the equation, the point of the representation of reality, the point of the thesis, the understanding, whatever it is, ceases to exist and loses all value. So this then mandates that the only form of attempt, mathematical or otherwise, to understand and render a true representation of reality to actually have value are those where, at its conclusion, consciousness continues indefinitely. Again, these might seem like philosophical ideas and thoughts, but they are not. So I've given two equations here that follow to this rule up here. Equations that ultimately would have value if they were true. Because if all consciousness and life cease and all work ceases in the universe, all value in all things is lost. So let's follow this. How do I say this? Oh, it's just so common sense. It's so common sense. Right. So we have one equation, which is you have the universal set plus zero, plus volume, plus Friedman's equation, plus the energy necessary to make up all the matter and antimatter in the universe, plus the baryon asymmetry, which is your baryon to photon ratio, plus unknown initial physical constants, plus time, plus life, plus consciousness, plus free will, plus sin, plus death, minus the initial physical constants, plus our current physical constants, minus life, minus sin, minus death, plus life, minus the Friedman equation, which would be your expansion of space-time, minus current physical constants plus new physical constants equals infinite time, infinite life, infinite consciousness. So if it helps anyone, I put it into a literacy format. You have the universal set, which is kind of equal to everything. I'm using the universal set to kind of stick with the mathematics vibe of the equation here, but I'm sure you can posit what that is, because we have to theorize. Remember, this whole start here is a theory or a belief, plus nothingness, because space didn't exist at the time, plus volume, which equals space, plus the expansion and constant addition of space, plus all of the energy in the universe, which is equal to our mass, matter, and antimatter, plus the baryon asymmetry, which again is your baryons are equal to your matter, your stuff, needing to be greater than your antibaryons, which is your antimatter, plus unknown initial physical constants, because they most likely had to be different to the ones we experience now, plus time, plus life, plus consciousness, plus free will, plus sin, plus death, minus the initial physical constants, because they had to go away for us to be able to experience death and degradation and as things are in the universe, plus our current physical constants, which again are all those big numbers up there, beautiful numbers, which are basically like the laws of the universe, minus life, minus sin, minus death, plus life, minus the expansion and constant addition of space, minus current physical constants, plus new physical constants equals infinite time, infinite life, and infinite consciousness. Now, I'm not going to go in depth and explain all of the components of this equation because it's a theoretical equation, because I can't observe most of the things here. I can't observe basically all of this because, again, as I explained in other videos, we weren't there, we didn't record it, wasn't observed, so it has to be theorized, as with any other equation. And for the things in my equation that almost certainly are not in any other standard model of the universe, like things here, and then how we get here, I'm not going to explain those either because I prefer that you contemplate on them and try and seek the truth for yourself. Because at least with this equation, we end up with infinite consciousness, which means it has value because it follows the above rule here. Now, the second equation is very similar to the first. It changes a few things, but it still has value because it ends up with your infinite ongoing consciousness. So I'll go over it quickly. I won't do this part of it here because I'll just be repeating many things, but I'll go over the layman's terms of the equation very quickly and then highlight some parts where it's different, which you can probably see quite clearly for yourself. So you have the universal set, which equals everything plus nothing, plus the volume, which equals your space, plus the expansion and constant addition of space, plus all of the energy in the universe, which equals mass, matter, and antimatter, plus your baryon asymmetry, being what it is, where baryons are greater than or more than the antibaryons, so that we can have stuff and have matter and have an observable universe, plus unknown initial physical constants, plus time, plus life, plus consciousness, plus free will, plus sin, plus death, minus the initial physical constants, plus current physical constants, minus life, and this is where we get something different. Again, I'm not going to explain it to you, ponder it. Minus the expansion and constant addition of space, so we're back on track here with the similarities. Minus the current physical constants plus new physical constants equals infinite time, infinite sin, infinite death, and infinite consciousness. Now, your initial reaction to these might be like, oh, this is ridiculous, this is silly. But the problem is that these are just as justified as any other mathematical equation that looks at the universe, looks at reality and goes, this is my best attempt to explain it. Because all of the best mathematical theories are exactly that. All of them are theoretical mathematics filled with contradictions and violations. These don't have contradictions, nor do they have violations. But again, who am I to say that truthfully, as I cannot see, observe, measure, and have not been around for the whole universe? But these are just as valuable attempts to put a view and understanding of the universe, of reality, onto paper in a mathematical, comprehensible explanation. That's as simple as it is. I'm going to leave it there. I'm fired up. I'll cool down. I hope this video was helpful to you. And I hope it makes you think. Don't let anyone else tell you how the universe is. Use other people's works. Use other people's ideas. Do the best you can. Remember the consequences if you're wrong. Love you. Catch you later.